On Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman interviewed investigative journalist Catherine Eban on her new book, Bottle of Lies, the inside story of the generic drug boom. Goodman calls the book an explosive expose. I believe the book may make you angry or terrified if you take generic medication. Here is some information from the interview. Of all prescriptions filled in the U.S., 90% are generic drugs, most made in India and China. Nearly 80% of active ingredients of all our drugs, brand name or generic, and almost all our antibiotics are made outside the U.S. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, found drug quality of factories in India and China below the world average in quality. That is an understatement. For example, 2 factories in China and India were linked to recalls of commonly prescribed hypertension drugs, losartan and valsartan, after testing found they were tainted with possible carcinogens, cancer-causing substances. If you go to a pharmacy, you will automatically be switched to a generic drug if one is available. Even though the name of the manufacturer will be on the label, consumers will not have information on where the drug was actually manufactured. Nearly 80% of all active ingredients in all our drugs, brand name or generic, are made outside the U.S. Active ingredient is the key ingredient in the drug that makes the drug effective. Commonly, an active ingredient is made in China, shipped to India, where the completed drug is made, and then shipped to your pharmacy in the U.S. That was from the Democracy Now! Amy Goodman interview of investigative journalist Catherine Eban on her new book, Bottle of Lies. I have no connection to Democracy Now! Or the publisher, author, or anyone associated with the book. I bought the book when it was first published and just out on bookstore shelves. This is my copy of the book. This book is more than 400 pages. I read it twice. I found it hard to put down. Some of it reminded me of one of Robin Cook's medical thriller novels. Dr. Cook's books are fiction. Eban's book is nonfiction and unfortunately all too real. Here is more from the interview and the book. Those manufacturing plants make different levels of quality for different markets. Their manufacturing standard can be whatever they can get away with. They make relatively better drugs for more regulated markets in the U.S. and European Union, and worse quality drugs for developing countries, places they call ROW, R-O-W, rest of the world, where regulation is poor or non-existent, so they will not get caught. When Americans travel to those countries and see how cheap they can get what they believe are the same drugs they get in the U.S., those drugs are not the same. The quality is bad or even dangerous. Ranbaxy was India's largest drug company and largest maker of generic drugs and the fastest growing generic drug maker in the U.S. Whistleblower Dinesh Thakur revealed more than 200 drugs in over 40 countries were filed with data that did not exist or falsified data. This kind of fraudulent data is what they were using to get approval from the U.S. FDA. Ranbaxy was manufacturing a huge number of generic drugs for the U.S. market as well as all over the world. The FDA, in the middle of criminal investigation of Ranbaxy, allowed Ranbaxy to manufacture the biggest generic drug in U.S. history. The first generic version of Lipitor, the cholesterol-lowering drug millions of Americans take. Millions of Americans took atorvastatin, Ranbaxy's generic Lipitor, generating nearly $600 million in the first 6 months for Ranbaxy. The manufacturing plant in India was bad and did not meet the FDA standards. FDA Inspector Peter Baker inspected 86 plants in India and China. He found some aspect of fraud or deception in 67 of the plants he inspected. In India, he was followed, threatened, poisoned with tainted water. Some investigators he worked with were poisoned, spied on, their hotel room bugged. Baker was one of the best FDA inspectors. He was too effective. The FDA pulled him off doing inspections. Why is all of this happening? Some of the reasons are political, economic, and diplomatic. We do not want to antagonize foreign governments. Our government and regulatory agencies have no powers of enforcement in foreign countries. And we need generic drugs. Generic drugs are essential to balancing budgets across America. Without them, every large-scale government health program like the Affordable Care Act, Medicare Part D, the Veterans Administration would be unaffordable. And Americans are demanding cheaper drug prices. American brand name pharmaceutical companies are moving their manufacturing to places like India. They can cut some of their costs by about 80%. 80%, lowering cost of labor and cost of ingredients. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has a proposal to get the U.S. government to manufacture essential generic drugs because this is a national security issue. We need to manufacture our own medicine. A number of FDA investigators, based on things they witnessed in foreign drug manufacturing plants, have stopped taking generic medication manufactured overseas. They try not to get sick. They are very particular about which companies they will take drugs from based on what they know from their own investigations. And that was some information from the Democracy Now! Amy Goodman interview of investigative journalist Catherine Eban, and from her book Bottle of Lies, The Inside Story of the Generic Drug Boom. Watch the interview on democracynow.org. It's about 59 minutes. It's good. Americans need to read this book. It's an easy book to read. There is much more to learn from it than in a 59 minutes interview or from what I'm telling you. You owe it to yourself and your health.